In this lecture, let's review how short-circuiting works with some logical operators. So in JavaScript, some logical operators, such as the AND and the OR operator, have a feature called short-circuiting. So short-circuiting in logical operators means that in certain conditions, the operator will immediately return the first value and not even look at the second value. And this probably sounds confusing, so of course let's write some code here. So starting with the AND operator, the AND operator short circuits when the first operand, so when the first value is false, and then will immediately return that first value. So let's use a console.log here, and let's do what I just said. So when the first value is true, the AND operator will automatically return the second operand, so the second value, no matter what that is. So let's say some string. And so indeed, immediately we get some string here. And so here we have no short circuiting. The short circuiting works in the AND operator when the first value is false. So here, if we have false, then there is a short circuit and the operator does not even look at the second value. So instead it immediately returns the first one here. And this can be quite helpful basically in order to use this as an if. So for example, we could do has movie adaptation and this book has a movie. And so here the operator, just like in this previous line, immediately returns this false value because as we can see here, has movie adaptation is false. And so the AND operator short circuits and doesn't even look at this other part here. But of course, if we go back to using the first book right here, then we get this book has a movie. So again, this acts a little bit like an if, right? And so sometimes in React, we use that to our advantage. And this also works with so-called truthy and falsy values. So a truthy value is basically any value that is not a falsy value. And the falsy value, let's just write that here, is 0, an empty string, null, and undefined. And I think there's actually one more, which I can't think of right now. So yeah, these are the ones that actually matter. So this one is not one of these falsy values, and therefore it's a truthy value, which means that for the AND operator, it is as if this was actually really a true value, because basically behind the scenes, this gets converted to true. And so, since this is true, we get the second value out of the operation. But if we use a falsy value, let's say 0, then we get that first one. So here once again, we have short circuiting in action because this is a falsy value. All right, so that's enough for the AND operator. Now let's go to the OR operator, which works exactly in the opposite way. So this one short circuits whenever the first operand is true and will then return it. So if we have true or some string, it doesn't really matter here the word, then we immediately get true. But if we have false, then we get some string. And so from this example, we can see that the short circuiting happens here in this case whenever the first value is true. So this is true, so the operator doesn't even look at the second value. Now we can use this here actually to our advantage in order to set default values. Let's try an example actually with the data that we're working with. And let's first look at book.translations.spanish. And so we get this Spanish string here. And that's because we have a Spanish translation for this book. But for the other book, again, book number 2, I think there is none. So yeah, it's undefined. And so let's say that we wanted to set a default value in case there is none. So we can use the AND operator for that. So let's say Spanish translation is book.translations.spanish or not translated. So the result of Spanish translation right now is not translated, because remember, this one was undefined, and undefined is one of these falsy values, right? And as we saw here, when the value is false or falsy, then the AND operator goes to the second part of the operator. So there's no short circuiting. And so here we are then using that to our advantage by setting this default string right here. And so this is then what will become the result of this entire operation, and then it will get assigned to this variable. And if the book was number 1, which I'm not going to do now, but yeah, you remember that it had a translation. And so then this here would become a truthy value, and then we would have short circuiting. So this one would not be evaluated, and then the value of Spanish translation would simply be this one. Great. However, this can also go wrong, because this works for all the falsy values, such as 0 as well. So sometimes that can have some consequences. So let me show you what I mean by that. So in book.reviews.library anything, and now .review count is 0. So each of these books has this reviews property, and there we have some reviews from Goodreads and from library anything or something. And so then in there, well, this one doesn't have anything. Or actually it does, but as you saw down here, that's only available in the Pro edition, which you have to pay. And so yeah, inside reviews we have Goodreads and library anything. And then each of those has a rating count, and reviews count. But for this book number 1 that we're using right now, the reviews count for library anything is 0. And so let's use this value so I can show you that this can also go wrong. So this setting a default value. So count, let's call it actually count wrong. So book.reviews.library anything.reviews count or no data. So basically we want to get the reviews count, but if there is no value there, then we want it to be no data. So let's see what count wrong is. Well, it says no data, but we know that it is actually 0. So we would want the count to be 0 and not no data, because there is actually data, right? So for the book 1, for example, or any other book, there is this other number. So something that is not 0. And so here then the count wrong is actually correct. So here 452 is exactly what we want. But not when it is 0. So when this value is 0, it is a falsy value. And so when this is a falsy value, which 0 is, the result of this operation, so of this operator, will be the second part, which in this case is, again, wrong. Now to solve this, JavaScript has recently added a new logical operator, which is called the nullish coalescing operator. So a very weird name, but what matters is that it works very similarly to the OR operator, but it does also short circuit for falsy values. So let me show you what that means. So again, const, now let's just call it count, is equal to book.reviews.library anything.reviews count, and then question mark, no data. So here we have basically exactly the same, but instead of using OR, we're using the nullish coalescing. And so now the count will indeed not be no data, but will be 0. So this knowledge coalescing operator will only return the second value when the first value is null or undefined, but not when it is 0 or an empty string. And I get that this sounds super confusing probably right now, but you will see in practice that this makes all the difference, and it is yet another nice addition here, this one, to JavaScript.